This special episode is brought to you by TR Historical. If you're a lover of history, then go to trhistorical.com. There you'll find apparel, decor, and gear, and our listeners will receive 10% off plus free shipping within the U.S. if you use promo code GBERG1863. So go to trhistorical.com, TR Historical, for the love of history.
You're listening to Addressing Gettysburg. Hello, ladies and gentlemen. This is Halloween, the feast of all hallows, the hallowest of eves. In the days of yore, the people are coming from the graves as zombies, and Frankenstein, he's being put together on the table of Frankenstein. It is Halloween, and
I never really could do a good scary voice.
That was pretty good, honestly.
But as you all know, we are all about Gettysburg and the Civil War and broadening your horizons and putting everything into context for you. And so for the last better part of the year, we've been doing holiday.
There you go.
Thank you. Episodes with Matt BOOders from the History Things podcast. He's a licensed guide at Antietam. You're a seasonal ranger. Are you still seasonal?
Yeah.
Seasonal ranger at Monocacy. He does a lot of things, ladies and gentlemen. Author?
Yes.
Author of 2 books?
2, yep, with the third on the way.
With a third on the way. Congratulations. Do you want to tease that one a little bit?
It's Faces of Union Soldiers at Fredericksburg.
Spooky. Ooh, when are you going to do Gettysburg?
Actually, we've been discussing
Whoa!
it. We've got a particular section of the battlefield we'd probably focus on because it's just such a huge story
a good idea.
to do the whole thing.
Like Faces of the Union dead at the wheat field. Culp's Hill. Oh, I like that. Okay, good. Culp's Hill, that's a good one.
Yeah, we are looking into doing something with Culp's Hill.
Oh, I like that. All right, very good. You're going to have to talk to Charlie Fennell, maybe.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, I don't know. Faces of the Dead. I don't know. You probably just go to an archives and find pictures. But still, whatever. Charlie is the man of... he is the Culp's Hill guy.
Nice.
It's more like you have to pay tribute to Charlie. You know, you have to come in and just kiss the ring. He's the godfather of Culp's Hill. Yeah. Right.
Get your blessing before doing something on Culp's Hill. Okay.
And he goes, you called me on the day of my daughter's wedding and, asked me for a favor and I've never heard of you before. And, the whole thing. All right, anyway, so it's Halloween, ladies and gentlemen. Matt is here to do Halloween.
In the Civil War, Halloween in the 19th century, something like that, right?
The rise of spiritualism in the 19th
century.
The
rise of spiritualism. Woo!
Mike, 6 Questions Lentz is over in the corner there. He might chime in later on, but if you hear some laughing in the background, that's him. And if you hear things falling down, that's also probably him as well.
Don't fall over, Mike.
And don't knock anything over. Be careful of that stapler. I'm just kidding. I'm just teasing you, Mike. Don't worry about it. All right, Matt. Get us started. Why don't you start us with a background of Halloween in general? Did it start in the United States during the mid-19th century?
Right. Well, again, thanks for having me back,
Of
Matt.
course.
It's a pleasure
Of course.
to be here.
So thanks for doing the work for these things.
Oh, not a problem at all. It absolutely does not start in the United States, and it does not start in the 19th century.
What? Well, surely it starts with the Christians.
No, we're going back even further.
Wow.
The origins of what we now know as Halloween date back more than 2,000 years to the Celtic celebration of Samhain. Mm-hmm. Looks like Samhain when it's spelled out.
Of course it does, which is why I gave up my Gaelic classes because...
Did you actually take Gaelic classes?
Where would I take Gaelic classes?
No idea.
Yes. No, but I never, I don't want to try. Shlanta. Everybody says Sláinte, during... and then you read it, and it's like slainty.
Okay.
And I'm like, nah, I don't want to have anything to do with that language. With all due respect to my, heritage as an Irishman. But go ahead, man.
There you go.
Sorry.
So, Samhain, as it's pronounced, was an end of season and ancestral worship holiday where the souls of those who had died that year could potentially be contacted due to the close nature of both the physical and spirit realms.
Why are the two realms so close on that day?
It is believed, and again, I'm not a religious scholar, so my apologies if there are those out there who have significant degrees in this who disagree.
Write us in. We'll mention it on the live show.
There you go.
Go ahead.
Now, it is believed by the Celtics at the time that at the end of the harvest season, going into the winter months, that is their new year, and that's when the two realms are closest together. Okay, that's when you have potential crossover of communication. We also see a lot with traditions of bonfires, which may, as we were discussing before, may have started as bone fires.
Yeah.
Some of the celebrations and traditions surrounding the early celebrations were these big old fires of bones, burning bones, which is similar to what we see here at Gettysburg with the destruction of horses after the the battle.
Okay.
They got to burn them.
Sure.
So potentially that's where that term bonfire comes from. There may have been some form of costumes, though we don't know if that was ceremonial purposes or just for the holiday itself and the celebration. And an early form of trick-or-treating seems to have come out around this time as well.
Now, what kind of costumes would they have? Just something to disguise themselves?
Probably animal
or?
skins and maybe a mask or something to that extent.
Okay.
It's interesting that you mentioned disguising themselves because we do see this with Samhain and then with some of its later adaptions towards Halloween, where we have folks either, and it does go both ways, stating that they are either trying to blend in with the spirit folk and the boogies and everything else that's supposedly running rampant and abroad during that night.
The boogies.
It's another variation on ghosts and dice and things like that.
All right.
Or dressing up to potentially scare them off. And we see the same thing with jack-o'-lanterns, which we'll go into later as well.
Oh, okay.
Yep.
Very good. All right.
Now, what's interesting is not only is this a night for celebration, but it's and potentially communing with the dead, but divination, both for communication with the departed and looking into the future, were both practiced at this time. So
No, and this is, refresh me on the time period we're talking about now.
This is about 2,000 years ago.
2,000 years ago.
Yeah.
Okay.
So before Common Era.
Right. So then they're not, so this wouldn't be, so this is like pagan stuff.
Right. Exactly.
Okay.
Yep. To use the term.
Right.
And somewhere around 49 Common Era, the Romans take over the British Isles. Like most of the British Isles. I know folks are going to be squawking about Hadrian's Wall and all that good stuff. And yes, they could only go so far north.
Sure.
But for the most part, the Romans take the British Isles, including Ireland, good chunk of southern Scotland, so forth and so on. And their traditions begin to blend into these Celtic pagan traditions as well.
Okay.
In fact, we'll see a blending of cultures with the adding of Feralia, which is a Roman celebration for commemoration, so for commemorating the dead, and also for the goddess Pomona, the goddess of the harvest. And interestingly enough, any idea what her symbol was?
Corn?
Close, an apple. And we think that
It's not
might
that close,
we think that might be where bobbing for apples comes from.
Oh.
Yep.
Oh, wow. So it goes that far back, bobbing for apples.
Yep.
You'd think people would get tired of things after 1,000 years. But,
Well, it's not easy to do either. Have you ever tried to bob for apples?
Yeah, it's not easy to do.
It's kind of a pain in the butt, actually.
Yeah. No, it's, I never could succeed at that.
Yeah. Now, Mike, we were discussing before the show here the Christian influences on Halloween, obviously. And the Catholic influence on Halloween begins early on, but the Romans have already kind of put their finger in this pot. All Saints' Day originally was declared in 609 Common Era to be May 13th.
Oh.
Okay. But Pope Gregory IV is going to move it to November 1st in 835 Common Era. Okay. And he's going to do that for a number of reasons, and some of them have been speculated to kind of merge with this traditional Celtic holiday of Samhain.
So you have All Hallows Eve.
Correct.
The night before, and the next day is All Saints.
Yep. And then the next day is All Souls.
All Souls, that's right. I forgot that part.
And so we're going to be, with these three, it's called the All Hallowtide.
All Hallowtide.
Right.
Hallowtide. Okay.
Hallowtide, yep. And when you think about it, this is not that far off the rocker for Catholicism today, because we have the midnight mass for Christmas.
Mm-hmm.
We have the Easter vigil for Easter as well. So beginning the celebrations and the commemorations before these major holidays, because remember, All Souls or All Hallowed.
All Hallows Eve.
All Hallows Eve, but more specifically, All Saints Day, was a big deal.
Sure.
It was a holy day of obligation and all that good stuff for a long time.
Right.
It's obviously not revered like it is nowadays. It's not revered.
Yeah, I don't remember having to go to church on All Saints Day.
Well, I'm sure there was probably somebody thinking that we should be going.
I'm sure, but
I don't recall either.
They didn't have my ear.
So this idea of beginning the celebrations the evening or the night before is tied into a lot of Christian celebrations, especially Catholic Christian celebrations.
Okay.
Now, All Hallows Eve in the Christian tradition is used for praying for the departed souls, particularly those recently departed who were still in purgatory.
Ah, yes.
Okay. All the Catholics out there just nodded sagely at that.
Yes.
And all of the Protestants just went, what?
Purga-who?
Yeah. Think of purgatory as God's waiting room.
Yeah.
At least that's how I always described it. Basically, you don't get to go to heaven or hell immediately.
Right.
You got to wait to be judged and so forth and so on. Or waiting till Judgment Day.
Yeah, it sounds like torture.
Now, at this time, as we're getting into the Dark Ages and later the Middle Ages, we are going to see celebrations throughout not only the British Isles, but also continental Europe, particularly Germany and France, that are going to start to embrace these customs as well. The displaying of holy items, memento mori, particularly the bones of saints, becomes very popular at this time. The relics, the religious relics.
Sure.
For those parishes that were too poor or perhaps they didn't have a religious relic, it became very popular to do these black parades where folks would dress up as either all in black or they would dress up as elements of the faith, for instance, the various saints and things.
Like dressing as your favorite saint or something. Like, yeah.
But they would oftentimes be choosing martyrs and would dress up roughly like how they were martyred.
Oh. Well, so is that maybe where we get like the ghoulish costumes that we wear today, where everything's gory?
And the Halloween parades that we still see in some communities today.
Wow. Right, Mike?
Now, there's also a tradition that begins in the 15th century called souling, which is probably the beginnings of trick-or-treating. Okay. The idea of souling is that particularly children and the poor would go around to various houses and either act like saints, departed saints and whatnot, or beg for food and treats, sometimes money, in return for praying for your relatives or those who you might have in purgatory.
So, wow. Yeah. So they're like prayer terrorists.
Perhaps a bit blunt, but...
Well, I mean, like, we're going to do, I'll pray for your relative if you give me money.
Right.
Or Reese's peanut butter cup.
Treat. Yeah. Exactly.
Yeah. Okay.
Now,
I don't like that.
Well, it's a tradition that continues for quite a while.
Okay.
And as the British begin to cross the pond and come to what becomes the United States, they're going to bring their traditions with them.
Sure.
Now, huge surprise, who basically begins to settle New England?
New Englishmen.
Yes, Puritans.
Puritans, of course.
How do you think they like Halloween?
Oh, they don't like it at all.
No,
they
don't.
No.
They also don't like most of the other Christian holidays at this time. So Christmas, Easter, they're not about that either. However, interestingly enough, big fans of Guy Fawkes Day.
Well,
5th of November.
yeah, no, I know. Well, I'm trying to think if that makes sense. No, doesn't make sense.
It makes-
Well, wait, it does, but yeah, go ahead.
It makes sense in the sense that Guy Fawkes Day initially was very anti-Catholic,
Right.
because Guy Fawkes and his compatriots were Catholics trying to blow up the king,
Right.
And the House of Lords. So, yeah, 1605, the Gunpowder Plot occurs, and it's celebrated ever since.
Okay. Now, but the Puritans, I'm not really well versed in Puritan history, but were they coming here because they were persecuted over there?
They believe so.
They believe so.
Yeah.
So then they would love anybody that would want to kill the king.
Well, they're not about killing the king. They're celebrating the fact that we're burning a Catholic. And denouncing the papacy.
I missed that because I was looking for a note here. Okay.
Yeah.
Yes. All right. Okay. Very good.
So this and
F them,
they're
then.
extremely superstitious too. Okay?
Sure, of course.
And they believe, of course, that's where
I think we know that
Salem
from
witch trials and things like that's
Yeah.
going to come from. And
Crazy
so
bastards.
they believe there's stuff in the woods. They believe that devils walk among us, so forth and so on. And that's a fascinating tradition all in of itself. But these traditions from Europe that we're going to traditionally tie in with Halloween here in what becomes the States, such as bonfires, some of that starts with the Guy Fawkes Day as well.
I wonder if the fear that some of us have, even into adulthood, of the woods, comes from the Puritans, or is that just a normal human thing? Like
That's a normal human
It is
thing,
a normal
yeah.
human thing.
I mean, we could rabbit hole this really easily.
Yeah. Let's not do that.
But when Catholic and other immigrants with Celtic and Germanic background begin to come to the colonies, they're going to bring their traditions with them as well. Then we begin seeing the celebration of All Hallows Eve in the colonies, much as they had been done in the Old World. So the souling and things like that.
Right.
Halloween as we know it today, secular and very children-focused, was really established in the early 20th century in a large part to tamp down on the vandalism and buffoonery that was occurring in the early 20th century.
So it's like if we take the kids out and we're all watching them, they can't get into as much trouble.
Right, and we can have a big party and a parade, maybe a costume contest, that sort of thing. Everybody's together, everybody's having a good time, and they're not going out and kicking pumpkins or tearing up my garden or so forth and so on.
Now, here you have, this is from Alexandria, Virginia, the local news, Alexandria, Virginia, from, and this is later, I don't want to ruin it for you, but you're talking about the change of the tradition in the 20th century. Mm-hmm. This is from October 30th, 1861. And it says, even here, many a lassie has set up till past midnight and then eaten a spoonful of cornmeal dough when that was a popular incantation. That's not what I was looking for. I saw corn and I thought of the throw. Where was? Oh, here. Sorry. Halloween. Last night being Halloween. This is from the Enquirer, Lancaster, Pennsylvania, 1st of November, 1862. Halloween. Last night being Halloween, or as it is more generally called nowadays, Hallow Eve, many of the boys and girls amuse themselves by showering corn, gravel, and other such harmless missiles against the windows of our citizens who left their shutters open. I'm sorry, a handful of now maybe I'm thinking of modern gravel. I don't know what he's talking about with gravel here, but I've been hit in the face with gravel. I've thrown it at a window. I'm not going to lie. I mean, it was a broken window already, and it was just it was the whole window laying against. It wasn't in a building, is what I'm saying, and it can break glass. Yeah, it can break glass. What is with these kids? That's not a harmless missile.
Well, apparently to those folks it was, and really during the Civil War it seems to be that it's more kind of, as they said, harmless missiles, little practical jokes, and minor vandalism, that sort of thing. It starts getting rougher in the early 20th century, like into the 1910s and teens.
Well, also, if you were older in your teens, for example, it says here, in some instances where boys pretty well grown in years were engaged,
right,
considerable annoyance was experienced by our citizens from the pranks performed by them.
Yep, exactly. So that first one that you started to read
Yeah.
with cornmeal and whatnot, we'll
Yes.
actually get into that in a moment because
Okay.
that actually ties into one of the major pop culture items of the day.
Okay, go ahead.
Okay.
Sorry, I didn't mean to derail you. I just
No,
wanted
not
to
at
get
all.
that in there when you mentioned things.
Now, one of the other aspects that, of course, we're all very familiar with Halloween and something that I loved as a kid is jack-o'-lanterns. Still love jack-o'-lanterns, but didn't start as pumpkins. And you probably know this, but the carving of turnips or gourds into lanterns with faces likely dates to the souling tradition as well. Depending on your tradition, the faces of jack-o'-lanterns were meant to either represent the ghosts and goblins abroad in the world or scare them off. So
Okay,
each
yeah.
culture kind of takes things a little bit differently, a little bit different twist on it.
My question is though, like, why do you think that would scare off the ghosts and goblins? They're already dead. Like, they're not. You can't kill them. Can you kill them?
Depends on who you talk
I
to.
guess. I don't know. Okay.
I honestly don't know in regards to that sense. Maybe they're used to being the scariest thing around, and suddenly there's this flaming face.
Okay, I guess. Yeah. Who knows?
I'm just pulling strings on
I
that
haven't
one.
been dead yet, so it's hard for me to.
Right. Now, what's interesting is the jack-o'-lanterns idea brings a very decidedly Irish bent into the folklore around Halloween, specifically with the tale of Stingy Jack, a drunken con man who tricks the devil himself twice and gets him to agree not to take his soul to hell. However, on Jack's death, he wasn't allowed into heaven either. He was too wicked of a man to be allowed into heaven, and then he can't go to hell, and so he was cursed to wander the world with only a lantern to light his way. And in some variations of this story, the lantern is actually lit by a coal from hell.
You know, this is what I love about the Irish, and I'm very proud to be half Irish, because, you know, you hear, other groups, they cry the blues when people stereotype them.
Mm-hmm.
The Irish, they just made up their own, and they said, "Hey, we're a bunch of drunks. We've got Scratchy Jack or whatever the guy's name was there, Stingy Jack.
Yep.
And he's a drunk, just like your Uncle James and your Uncle Peter, and everybody else. And we're like, yeah, we like to drink. What else you got?
We're going to roll with it.
We're gonna roll with it. Yeah, go ahead, make fun of us. We'll still beat you. Go ahead. What else?
Now, this idea of these Irish traditions being brought in almost gets superseded by the Scottish traditions that got brought in. And you
Okay.
started hinting at that with that first article you were reading because Robert Burns writes an incredibly famous poem in 1785 that's published in 1786 called Halloween.
Yes.
Which describes the frolicking and divination tie-ins of Scottish traditions to the holiday. And Halloween is 28 stanzas.
Oh,
it's
boy.
huge.
That's long.
It is extremely
This article
long,
only has 2 lines or 2 verses.
right?
It is nice though. When merry, friendly country folk together did convene to burn their nuts and pull their stocks and have their Halloween.
That's right. And that was actually one of the stanzas I was looking at here as well, because those are both divination spells or elements of divination spells.
Now, what, burning your nuts and pulling your stocks?
Correct. Specifically, when they talk about pulling stocks, they're
Yeah.
referring to going blindly into what would be referred to as a cabbage patch, but it was probably actually kale.
Yeah.
And pulling these.
I've heard if you pull your stock too much, you can go blind.
Well done, sir. Well done.
Thank you.
No. The idea was that you would pull the straightest and sturdiest stalk you could.
Yes.
Stop, Matt.
Keep going, Matt. Keep digging it.
And then that,
Yeah.
looking at the roots and the base of it would tell you how your life is going to go, so forth and so on.
Now, here, there's something, it's years ago, country, but a lot of labor stuff. Here, it says something, a singular custom of robbing cabbage gardens and hanging the stolen vegetables at the doors of neighbors has grown up. It is a custom, quote, more honored in the breach than in the observance. And will, end quote, and will probably fall into disuse hereafter. Well, clearly, because we don't do that anymore.
Right. And that goes back to the kind of the minor vandalism and harmless fun or pranks, if you will, of the night. Because what are you going to do with those stalks after you've pulled them up to check your future? Well, you can't replant the thing, so let's go throw them at somebody.
Okay, so you tug on your stock and then you throw it at some. Yeah, it's disgusting. So they had to end it. I get it.
Now,
all right, what else?
The burning of. So let me read this stanza real quick.
Okay.
The old guildwife's well-hoarded nuts are round and round divided, and many lads' and lassies' fates are there that night decided. Some kindle costly side by side and burn together trimly. Some start away with saucy pride and jump out o'er the chimney. Full high that night. And that is specifically referring to the tradition of taking nuts and burning them to see who your future is going to be with.
Now, how would they do? Well, first of all, what nuts are we talking about? Chestnuts? Probably whatever's in season, I guess.
Probably whatever in season.
Yeah, okay.
It doesn't specifically say.
Is there a tie-in between these burning nuts and then roasting chestnuts for Christmas?
I don't honestly know.
Okay. We'll find that out for next time.
It wouldn't surprise me if there's some sort of tie-in.
Yeah.
But what they would do is you would have, you're going to get me for this, a nut for yourself, and then you would have the people you were interested in.
Yeah.
Okay. You'd put them all on essentially a grill over the flame.
You grill your nuts.
Yep. And then you'd watch them, and if they cracked and popped, you weren't to be with them, that person.
No, I would not be with someone who popped my nuts.
If you both caught flame together,
yeah,
they were the one that you were destined to be with.
So if my nut and Julie's nut both caught on fire at the same time,
relatively,
okay, then we're supposed to be together.
Correct.
However, if my nut and Sarah's nut, mine caught fire, hers exploded.
Right.
Then no dice.
Yeah. Be mindful of
Sarah.
Sarah.
If I ever date somebody again, I'm going to try this.
Why not?
I'm going to try to burn nuts and see if it works.
There you go.
I'll be like, this is my nut, this is your nut, just watch. And then I'll tell you afterwards.
And we'll see what happens.
But I'm not dating anymore, so there.
Even though this is a 1780s poem, it's still extremely popular. And even in the articles I brought in there that you were reading, they're still referencing it.
Yeah, the nuts.
Some of these articles are literally just descriptions. Okay, here's Robert Burns' poem. Here's what all this stuff means. Because the original poem was written in Gaelic.
Yeah.
And I had to get a translated version.
Oh, really? You don't speak Gaelic?
No, I don't.
I'm trying to see if there's any more references to nuts in here, or just those the cabbage or whatever. Yeah. No.
Okay.
Sorry. Yeah, not in this one. Well, here we noticed a few store boxes thrown into the street and a fence of boards across Annie Street. I mean, that's kind of like more along the lines of pranks and stuff.
Right.
And, it's just mischief.
Right. Exactly.
Now, did you encounter, when you were looking up Halloween, did you encounter anything about Mischief Night? Because that's like a thing with toilet paper and stuff. Did you?
Not specifically Mischief Night. Are you referring to what we would have called back in the 80s and 90s as Devil's Night?
No, so I think it's a regional thing. In Jersey, we called it Mischief Night.
Okay.
It's the night before Halloween.
Right.
And
Devil's
you go and
Night.
throw toilet paper in people's trees and egg their houses.
Gotcha.
Is that what you did?
Well, in I didn't personally, but in Michigan, it was
a very respectful young boy.
It was called Devil's Night. And honestly, it has kind of a dark notation to it because there was a lot of fires that would get started in Detroit and stuff in the 80s.
Sure. But you weren't in Detroit, were you?
No, I'm Battle Creek.
Yeah.
But yeah, it seems like that's more of a 20th century thing.
Okay.
Yeah.
But it kind of sounds like they said, hey, you know how everybody like throws cabbage and roasts their nuts and stuff and gravel? Why don't we do that the night before, and then we'll just have candy and costumes and trick-or-treating on Halloween?
Sure.
And then, so it sounds like they extracted that from early Halloween celebrations.
Mm-hmm.
It's what it just sounds like. I don't know. I'm not saying, ladies and gentlemen, I'm not the historian. You are, Matt.
Right. Well, the 20th century, especially early and up through the 50s, is all about trying to tamp down on that vandalism aspect and everything else. So it wouldn't surprise me at all that if it was just entirely removed from the day,
right,
and utilized by us, the teenage vandals.
Yeah.
Almost said us. We're a little old for that.
No, yeah, that's not us. We inherited it.
There you go.
From those people. All right, so go ahead.
Now, kind of continuing with 19th century popular culture, one of my favorite stories of all time, of course, is The Legend of Sleepy Hollow.
Mine too.
Yep.
Actually, it is my favorite.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah. It's original American folklore, original American
and you could go
short stories
to Tarrytown today, and you could sit in the church that he talks about, and the bridge is there, but it's not the same bridge.
Sure.
And but in that graveyard attached to the church are all the names, the family names that he uses in the Van Tassels, the Van Garretts, the other
Von
ones.
Braun.
Von Braun, yeah. They're all there, all around the church.
Braun Bones, excuse me. Von Braun is a German.
Oh, yeah.
Entirely different situation.
It's NASA, wasn't it?
Yeah.
Yeah. You're right. Braun Bones. But you could see those headstones all around the church,
right,
in the original graveyard there.
That's awesome,
and it's cool. It's my let's see here, Harpers Ferry, Antietam, Tarrytown, my fourth favorite town to go
nice.
to. It's a cool little town. If you ever get the chance, ladies and gentlemen, go.
I'd like to.
Yeah.
That and the whole Salem area, because that's kind of
I've never been.
Not just the town of Salem, but that whole region. I'd love to.
I'd like to go up there too. And I think Washington Irving is buried in that cemetery as well.
Okay.
Right up on the hill.
Nice.
Yeah.
We definitely need to go then.
Yeah.
But he's going to publish The Legend of Sleepy Hollow in 1819. Now, it's set in 1790, just 7 years after the end of the Revolutionary War. The scene just prior to the infamous chase with the horsemen actually is set at a harvest party.
Okay.
So, Halloween.
Right.
Okay. More recent adaptions, such as the Disney animated version, or even 99 with Depp.
I love that one.
I do
but
too.
That's not very close to the book.
Right. Those all refer to Halloween,
right.
But it was a harvest festival that is basically Halloween.
Right. Okay.
Yeah. Of course, moving further into the 19th century, my favorite poet, Edgar Allan Poe. 1809 to 1849, his January 1845 work, The Raven, was an instant success after 10 years as a struggling poet and writer trying to make it work. He is considered to be, the inventor of the detective fiction.
Okay.
And then, of course, he's got all of his kind of gothic horror elements as well. So all of this darker pop culture items are out there. The folks of the mid-19th century, the 1860s, would have known all this. Okay, they would have been very familiar with all of these.
Sure.
Now, of course, Frankenstein or the Modern Prometheus by Mary Shelley.
So wait, why are you saying Frankenstein? Why not Frankenstein?
Frankenstein?
Yeah. Well, if you're going to add the well, I figured, we just go full Mel Brooks and just say Frankenstein.
Oh, we can do that.
Yeah, let's do that.
Okay,
let's
Frankenstein.
Frankenstein.
Very good. Frankenstein, or the Modern Prometheus,
right,
by Mary Shelley. And she actually would write that as part of a writing competition between herself, Lord Byron, of all people, and Percy Shelley, her lover and eventual husband. Now, Mary Goodwin would win this competition hands down when she first produces in 1816. It's then published in 1818 anonymously in London. And then the second edition, which was published in 1821, would include her name. She's 20 years old.
When she wrote that?
Yeah.
Really?
Yeah.
Wow.
18 when she wrote it, 20 when it's published.
20 when it's published.
Yeah.
18 when she wrote it.
Yep.
And people say we're too hard on the 18 and 20-year-olds today, but look at what they were accomplishing back then.
Right.
Now, wait a second. So, do we know what the the losers of that contest wrote.
I don't, honestly.
I would love to see. I wonder if those exist. Probably not.
Oh, I imagine there's probably someone who's done that research.
Yeah, I'm sure,
yeah.
and probably found nothing. I can't imagine that they would.
Probably cheap jump scares or something like that.
Yeah, right.
And then he turned the corner and boom!
Yeah, the man with the hook.
Right. It was on the door handle. Everyone's like, sure, Byron, sure.
Yeah, whatever, Byron. Hey, have you read this one? Frankenstein?
Or the modern Prometheus. Now,
that's pretty good. Okay, go.
This is considered today to be Gothic horror, and is kind of one of those true examples of Gothic horror. But it's also rightly thought to be the first true work of science fiction. I personally adhere to that idea because it's really looking at modern, especially for the time, uses of science or the abuses of science in this case, and where that could go and could go wrong.
Have you ever read it, or have you only seen
I have
movies?
read it.
You have. I haven't read it.
I need to read it again, honestly. It's been a couple of decades at this point.
I need to get a hold of it. Mike Lance stepping up to the microphone here. He's got something to add to the story. Go ahead, Mike.
Whenever we think of that, we always think of the Hollywood version of the monster.
Yeah.
And right. So
thank you for the impression.
Can you explain exactly what her purpose was? What's the main message of that book? Just a brief overstatement, and how does that pertain to 19th century attitudes towards death?
Well, actually, that's a huge question, Mike. Thank you for that.
Good job,
the monster is the victim in that story.
Yeah.
Okay. Dr. Frankenstein, excuse me, has gone above and beyond God's work. Okay, he has created life, and he's horrified by the life he's created. But the monster itself, who I think is eventually called Adam in the book, if I remember right.
Yeah. Okay.
He is essentially birthed into this world with no idea what's going on or no idea how to function, and he's abandoned immediately by Frankenstein. So how it pertains to the 19th century's views on death is, can science get us beyond death? Because we're involved, when she writes this, we're involved in the Second Great Awakening of religion. The Third Great Awakening is going to occur during the spiritualism revival that would occur in the 1840s through the early 20th century. So we have a lot of religion and science clashing at this time, and that's what we're also seeing with the modern Prometheus. Mike, did you want to add?
When did they start embalming? When was that?
Well, it really gets a big boost due to the American Civil War.
It gets a boost, but when was it first developed here, or in Western society? Let's say.
Well, the desire to preserve the dead's been around even in Western society
Forever.
for a long time. Yeah, because you want to make sure everybody who wants to see you before they put you in the ground can come see you.
But I mean, like, the
when did it
embalming
actually
with
begin?
Chemicals.
I couldn't tell you off the top of my head.
Because I wonder if
I'm guessing
can you
1850s.
Google that, Mike, while you're sitting there, please, if you don't mind. Because I'm wondering, and I don't want to say this if he comes back with the wrong date, but I'm wondering if it might be that was like the new rage at the time, and that was I don't know.
I don't know if it dates back that far. That's a good question.
Okay, so it doesn't. Yeah, all right. If you find the answer, just shout it out, Mike. We'll continue on. All right, Matt, go ahead.
Now, this dive into the 19th century's views on death, I really thought was well put together and done by a fairly recent book by Dr. Drew Gilpin Faust called This Republic of Suffering. Okay, 2009 publication, but it's a really good dive into the desire for the good death, having your family there, being able to have your last words and thoughts recorded. But more specifically, it showed, I really felt the book did a great job showing how this era lived with death all the time.
Yeah.
People didn't go into hospitals or go into hospice and things to pass away. You did that at home.
Right.
And that means
you were viewed at home.
You were viewed at home. The folks in your family or in your immediate neighborhood had to take care of you up until the point of death and then take care of you after death.
Maybe be buried in the yard.
Potentially.
Yeah. Or at least the local church cemetery.
Right. Exactly. Churchyards and cemeteries and all that good stuff. You know there's a difference between graveyard and cemetery?
No. What is it?
The graveyard is usually for family and maybe immediate friends.
Okay.
The cemetery is
Everybody.
public or a church's.
That makes sense.
Yeah.
Okay, so you have a graveyard on your farm.
Right.
And then the town has a cemetery.
Right. Or the church has
Green,
a cemetery.
like Evergreen Cemetery here.
Right. Mount Olivet and Frederick.
Yeah. Now, okay, that's interesting. Okay, yeah, it makes sense. Graveyard.
Right.
In the yard. Mike, did you find an answer for us?
Yes, I did.
What do you got?
Actually, modern, basically what we understand of modern embalming actually occurs really beginning in the 1600s in England.
Oh, my.
And in the mid-1700s, a Scottish dude, so it always comes back to Scotland here in this conversation.
They're the brave.
William Hunter would actually create attractions showing how to circulate blood and things like that. And so started to take these techniques that were coming about and really start to centralize them. And then you start seeing it really spread out. Of course, the United States having their cultural identity rooted in Great Britain,
Britain, yeah.
is also going to capture
Rooted
this.
in embalming? What's wrong with you? Jeez, man.
I'd like to throw in those things for the people to listen closely. Go ahead.
And so there's different stories of like Lord Nelson is embalmed and to be preserved in order to see him after he was killed at Trafalgar.
Put him in a whiskey barrel.
There you go. Yeah, exactly right. And so, but what we see is we really don't see really a explosion of this until the Civil War. The American Civil War really takes embalming to a whole new level.
So it is a practice in some form in 18, would you say 16, 19? When did she write that?
19.
Or when
1818 is when it's first 1819 is when it's first published, and then there's the second version later.
16
with her
is
name
when
on
she
it.
wrote it.
Yeah.
Oh, yeah. Okay. So then, so if that's something around them, maybe she's like, this is kind of ghoulish. And then from there, because, creative people, they get a little idea of this thing that's over here, but by the time they get to the end, it's like in a world you never thought. So maybe she's like.
Well, and then she's higher society as well, so she would have potentially had more exposure to the embalming process.
There you
go. And that's what we're seeing during the American Civil War as well, is that we have these funeral directors and embalmers, because it's really not funeral homes as we know it, but embalmers going out, grabbing up an officer from the battlefield, embalming that body, and then letting the folks at home know, hey, I've got your relative here. He's well preserved. Do you want him back?
It's like those prayer terrorists. Jeez.
And then they would then send money to have him sent back.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Okay.
So to Dr. Drew Gilpin Faust, the concept of a good death, could you describe that a little bit more in depth about what that means to 19th century Americans?
The good death is putting your effects in order, okay? It's not just having a last will and testament with planned out. It was literally to have your family around you so that you can do last words with pretty much everybody who's there, okay? And it was really setting the stage for those lithographs and drawings we see of the old man in the bed or the old lady in the bed, and everybody's kind of around them in those final moments as they pass on. It's setting that stage. And the American Civil War tears that away for so many people, because the war is so terrible and tragic that many do not have the ability to have this quote-unquote good death. And it's a very violent, oftentimes painful, and many times alone. Now, the discussion we were having just before the show I thought was very poignant about the attempts to replicate the good death either on the battlefield or immediately behind the lines in, say, an aid station or hospital. Mike, did you want to touch on that?
You had a good example.
Absolutely. Think about Sergeant Amos Humiston, for example. We always think of him in 20th and 21st century terms. He's pulling out this picture of his children to look at them before he dies. But in a way, I think he's also replicating that ritual
right?
Of
having
your
loved
family
ones
around you.
Yeah.
I think that's a brilliant deduction.
And I think that's what you see. You also see that in when you ever see pictures next to dead bodies on the battlefield. I think that's exactly what they're doing, is they're trying to recreate this ritual from back home.
Yeah,
right.
They can't do it because they're not home. They're so far away. This is the closest that they can come to doing it.
It's I liked it too when he said that. I was like, oh, I never thought of it like that.
Right, exactly. And think about these officers that are being cut down too, especially higher ranking officers that have staffs. They're your family at the front there, and you oftentimes hear of these descriptions of the staff gathering around General so-and-so.
Well, like Buford, Miles Keogh was cradling his head as he was laying there dying.
Or John Reynolds, who's with him. He would have had some staff officers with him, at the very least some runners that would have been with him in his final moments. Or actually, I think he was killed pretty much instantly. But regardless.
Yeah. But no, still, they're trying to do that. Yeah, so go ahead.
Yeah, also think of Hazlitt and Weed, right?
Oh, that's a great one.
They're calling over Hazlitt. Hazlitt's coming over to hear whatever, because Weed knows he's mortally wounded.
Right.
Hazlitt's trusted friend.
Mm-hmm.
He's telling Hazlitt something, and then Hazlitt gets hit.
Gets it.
Yeah.
Duck. That's what he told him.
Jeez.
Hey, that's a joke I heard from License Guide, so I'm allowed.
Oh, okay.
It's okay.
You're allowed to say that.
Yeah, it's not in bad taste.
So
go ahead.
This concept of death and living with, ironically, death, it would have been very familiar with the folks that we're dealing with during the era of the American Civil War, the Civil War era. This right in the Victorian period.
Because we today are very removed from death, right? Like you point out before, no one dies in the home anymore. Well, people still die in the home. Both my grandmother and my grandfather both died in their home.
They're of that generation, though.
Well, no, I mean, they just like dropped dead in the middle of the day.
Oh, okay.
They weren't like dying. They just
Got it.
out,
Well,
which is very lucky. I mean, that's the way I would like to go.
That's a blessing in its own right.
Exactly. For everybody, including them. Like, it's just, there's no suffering, there's no torture. It's just out. But mostly people, they get sick, they die. And you're right, we go to hospital. Well, we go to the hospital first, then hospice if it's the end. And it happens somewhere else. Yeah. And we get a phone call. And then the body goes from where it died to the funeral home. It's taken care of. And then we show up the next day and we look at this person who looks nothing like they did in life, laying in a box.
Preach on.
Yes. And so there's a woman I follow on YouTube. I think it's called Ask a Mortician. Yeah, it is. Ask a Mortician. I forget her name, Caitlin something. And she's fascinating. And she talks about all different things related to death and everything. And she makes this point too. It's like, but the dead body's not going to make you sick. It's not going to, it's not like poisonous. You know, you can hug a dead person that just died and, it's your grandmother, your mother, whoever it is. And she makes the point that we're so removed from death now that we think it's icky and, we're all going to die.
Right.
Everybody that's ever lived has died. Everybody that's living now will die. Do I want to like sit, on a couch with a corpse that's been sitting there for 5 days? No. That's disgusting.
Right.
But someone who just dies, if they die in your home, you don't have to be afraid of it and everything like that. We've lost that connection. We really don't have any real connections to true life anymore. We've sanitized our whole society. But in the 19th century, I think it's just very important to stress, up until the 20th century, all of mankind in all of the world was constantly living with death.
Honestly, you could probably argue until the mid to late 20th century we were doing that.
Let's do it.
Yeah, because yes,
actually, I don't want to argue because I agree with you.
While we do see the rise of funeral homes and things, we don't really have like long-term care and things like that really being established until after World War II, unless you're looking at things like state-run long-term care, like the soldiers' homes that are established after the Civil War. And that's because there's such a glut of these older, oftentimes enfeebled veterans, North and South after the war. And so we see state facilities being, and of course you do have even more tragic items such as asylums.
Yes.
And putting people in those for a whole slew of reasons that have no business being in asylums.
No, I know. I mean, we definitely need those back, but we need to run them better.
Certainly.
We have too many nut jobs running around. All right, so
now I wanted to touch a little bit on, now that we're definitely moving into the Civil War aspect of this, I did want to touch a little bit on what's going on during the Civil War on October 31st. So October 31st, 1861, the Missouri legislature would vote to remove itself from the Union. Now, interestingly enough, Missouri never officially leaves the Union. This is just the secessionist elements of Missouri's legislature.
Okay.
That's one of the reasons why some Confederate flags have 13 stars on them. 11 states left the Union, but both Kentucky and Missouri had large elements of their legislation decide to also leave, and so they have representation, let me use the air quotes there, in the Confederate Congress.
Okay.
We're also going to have some fighting on Halloween 1861, skirmishing at Greenbrier and Cotton Hill in western Virginia. This is also the day, as you're probably aware, Matt, that Winfield Scott will put in his formal request to retire. Mm-hmm. And taking over the next day would be our boy Little Mac, as the General-in-Chief.
Yes. Ugh.
Now, I've still got to get you on an Antietam tour, sir.
I'm dying to. Maybe this year.
As the year's almost
said it
wrapped
last
up.
year. Yeah, I know. Mike says you're good.
Oh, thank you, sir.
Did you get a tour from him?
Yes. 4-hour tour. It was nice.
All right. Well, I know he's good. I just haven't taken a tour with him yet. Right,
now, in 1862, we're going to have skirmishing on October 31st at Franklin, Virginia, and near the falls of the Kanawha River in western Virginia. This would also be the day that the 1st Rhode Island Cavalry is going to get mauled by Jeb Stuart's cavalry during the Loudon Valley campaign. And one of the regiments that helps pull their fat from the fire is, I believe, the 13th New Jersey Cav. It's a New Jersey cavalry regiment.
Yeah, Jersey. Finally did something good.
We would also have in 62 on Halloween the Union bombardment of Lavaca, Texas, and the preliminary movements for the Vicksburg campaign is going to begin. So now we're starting to see some big movements in the war. 63, the Union bombardment of Sumter continues. It's been going on for a while at this point, pounding that fort into rubble, as well as skirmishing in Louisiana, Alabama, and Mississippi. 1864, Halloween, Nevada is going to become the 36th state of the Union.
Welcome, Nevada.
Welcome, Nevada. We'll also have skirmishing at Shoal Creek, Alabama, and Hood would decide at Tuscumbia, Alabama, to use it as a base of operations from which to launch his Tennessee invasion, hoping that he's going to draw Sherman north instead of Sherman getting further into Georgia.
And Sherman's like, who cares?
Right, exactly. The Devil Forest is going to be at Fort Hyman on October 31st on the Tennessee River, disrupting traffic on the river. And the Union Navy is going to capture Plymouth, North Carolina on the Roanoke River, following a duel with multiple shore batteries. And of course, what's also going on in 1864 on Halloween? The Siege of Petersburg continues.
Oh, that's scary. That's scary. So, what are the soldiers doing? Like, what was the tradition that they grew up with? Throwing corn and gravel, apparently, right? And so, were you able to find anything about Army life, observations of?
Unfortunately,
Halloween?
Matt, not so much. Not in the Army. I went through well over a dozen different journals and letter collections, and even some of my guys who I know really are talking about everything are not talking about Halloween.
So it's not that big of a deal, probably.
And I'm guessing because first off, the war is on, they've got bigger things to think about, but also they're adults. Halloween's really seen as a kid's thing.
I'm so glad you say this, because what really grinds my gears about modern life is freaking adults doing the Halloween thing. Now, if I'm stepping on anybody's toes in this room, I'm sorry. But, I mean...
In what sense?
In what sense? Like, oh, this is what I'm going to be for Halloween this year.
Okay.
And then going to a Halloween party, getting smashed. Look, everybody likes to get smashed. I understand that. I'm not some, puritanical old fuddy-duddy here. I get it. But stop with it's just an excuse to go get smashed. Dressing up is what I'm talking about.
Sure.
Dressing up in a costume is just an excuse to stay home and get smashed and get out of my sight. That's all I'm saying.
I personally don't have an issue with folks enjoying Halloween parties or a haunted house or something like that during the holidays.
I'm such a grump.
That's okay.
I've been hanging out with Eric too long. I'm like, I hate everything that people love, and that's not true. I'm a very loving person. I just really hate certain things.
Now, I did find one account that could be argued as tying into the kind of holiday idea, but again, this is more for a holiday as opposed to specifically Halloween.
Okay.
On October 31st, 1862, this actually comes from the personal journal of Colonel Charles Wainwright.
I've heard of him.
Yep,
Yeah.
he's going to command 1st Corps Artillery.
Oh, yeah.
And he's talking about the preparations for the movement into the Loudoun Valley about a month after Antietam.
Okay.
Let's see here. We called on our hosts of yesterday and invited them to come over to headquarters for an evening for a tea drink.
Ew.
They have been, they having expressed a great longing for some good tea, which they say they have been without for a year. We got about half a dozen ladies together. Sanderson, as master of ceremonies, was untiring. Had the office tent ornamented with flags, and from all over our mess, stores managed to make quite a decent spread of it. After tea, we got a band up and had some dancing and all the national airs we could think of. The girls enjoyed it amazingly and were very patriotic. It will be quite an event in their lives. So, not necessarily pumpkin carving or trick-or-treating,
right,
but definitely making something of a little event for it in the field.
Sure, okay. So there's some tradition that is being carried down even into adulthood, but it was mostly a child's
right
game.
And even Alpheus Williams, who writes just copious amounts of letters to his daughters, and we've used him before on these discussions, he's not mentioning Halloween either.
And because I hear he was such a masquerader. He loved dressing up.
He had
whiskers.
Just fantastic whiskers.
Yeah.
So.
I mean, come on. Alpheus. All right.
So before we dive into our next section, really getting deeper into this idea of death and living with it and the development of spiritualism, I kind of wanted to set the stage a little bit with a poem that I did find in Harper's Weekly.
Wonderful.
Okay, this comes from one of the late October issues of Harper's Weekly from 1861. It's called Lines on Death.
Lines on Death.
Yep. The author is merely J.S.
JS, that's all.
That's all. He just gave the initials. I'm not going to read the whole thing, but I did want to pull out a couple of these brief stanzas.
Okay, dramatically, please.
But not alone upon the wave, or on the red fields where fall the brave, does death appear. He watcheth nightly at our bed, and while we take our daily bread, he standeth near. O death, thou art a cruel foe, with whom we battle here below in weary strife. The thought of thy sure victory would take away that joy might be in our short life. And it's going to go on like that. It describes the loss of life through battle, through chores, all sorts of things. It's very much laying out that, look, death is present in our lives.
Chores. I like that you mentioned chores.
Yeah.
I mean, like you're doing your chores and you fall off a roof, or you break a leg and there's no doctor nearby and nobody knows how to set it, or who knows?
Sepsis,
Sepsis, yeah.
One of the opening stanzas for this is great. He deems the man of pride and might and insects fluttering in the light of equal worth. So man and bug means nothing to death.
Yeah,
everybody is affected by death.
Damn right.
Yep. Rich and poor, so forth and so on.
Yep. Beautiful and ugly.
Yes, exactly.
Everybody dies.
That's very metal.
Yeah. Do you have is Sleepy Hollow your absolute favorite Halloween story and movie? What's your Halloween favorite movie? Give me your favorite movie.
Favorite Halloween movie is a good question, because I'm not a big horror movie fan. I I loved Legend of Sleepy Hollow, both the story and even some of the films and adaptions that it's done.
Right.
I'll probably go with that one, to be honest. But I don't really enjoy being scared. And,
really?
Yeah, and
you get
slashers.
nightmares?
I did when I was a kid. And slashers and
you
stuff
wet the bed?
are not my... I don't recall,
Till
honestly.
you were 23.
Thanks. It was a real bummer for my roommates in college.
Especially because you were on the top bunk.
I wasn't, actually.
No, so Sleepy Hollow, the Disney one with Bing Crosby doing the Ichabod, right? Yeah, that
Loved
one.
that. Yep.
Love that one too.
Yep.
And then Johnny Depp and what's her face? Those are my two favorite Sleepy Hollows. And I think Sleepy
Christina
Hollow.
Ricci.
Yes, thank you. I think that's my favorite.
There's some lines in it that bug me because they say crap they should have known better not to say, like, we thought you'd shot your bolt. Well, nobody has a bolt rifle to shoot their bolts. So whatever. It's nitpicky. It's the historian in me.
But and then there's certain ways that Christina Ricci pronounces things that really bugs me. Like she's like, "Oh look, the archer." And when they're in the fireplace at her old little cabin there. Mike Lance, you're chomping at the bit for something here. What?
Yeah, as far as a movie is concerned,
Yeah.
I'm going to go a little bit off the board.
Okay.
I'm going to go with the comedy.
Oh, okay.
I'm going to go with Arsenic and Old Lace.
Oh,
I was
look
in
at
Arsenic and
you.
Old Lace in high school.
Were you? Did you play Teddy Roosevelt?
I did.
You did?
Well, I put in for Teddy Roosevelt, didn't get the part. I was the corpse most of the play. They kept like dropping me in and out of the box. Dropped me on my face at one point.
Your audition was that exciting. They
was
said,
that
make him the dead guy.
That guy. That's perfect. You're the corpse.
Quarters, be the dead kid.
And I just kind of flop over. Now I was one of their victims, and then I played the corpse for most of the play.
Well, good for you. Good for you.
No, that's a great one.
No, that is a great one.
I really enjoyed
the one with
Arsenic and
Cary
Old Lace.
Grant.
Yes.
Yeah.
Absolutely.
Judy. All right, you have more there, or I thought you were done. That's why I went to the fun stuff. Do you have more?
I was going to dive into spiritualism and
Go.
things like that.
Yeah. All right. I'm sorry. I thought you were done.
Nope, not quite. So we've hinted at it quite a bit this afternoon, this evening now.
Yes.
But we do begin to see the rise of a new religious movement in the 1840s known as spiritualism. And it's going to have a big effect on folks in the United States and then later Europe because it actually starts stateside.
Now, what is spiritualism?
Spiritualism is the core tenet of spiritualism is that the living can communicate with the dead, that the dead wish to communicate, and that this can be achieved through a medium, usually in the form of a seance.
We should have had a seance. We had a Ouija board or something. But
Well, and that all ties into that too.
Yeah.
Knocking, Ouija boards, many, many various forms of seances and supposed communication.
Didn't you tell a story? I want to say this was Valentine's Day, that episode. Didn't you tell a story about a couple of soldiers and the girls doing was it a Ouija board that
It
they
was.
had? Yeah.
Yep. It was probably an early form of a Ouija board.
Right.
And I actually dove a little bit more into that because that was a great example of spiritualism being pronounced throughout this era.
Right.
One of those gentlemen at the board with the gal who's doing the writing, he actually then asked for a private seance with her.
Yes, of course it did.
And she is none too impressed with this guy.
Oh,
Yeah.
that's disappointing.
For him.
For him, yeah.
Yeah. But it is interesting because he swears up and down that he's not affecting the board and the spelling that's being done, even though during that group session, as we discussed, it very conveniently spells out his name as who this gal's going to marry.
Yeah.
And he later claimed that while he was not a believer, and that seems to be a big thing in a lot of these, well, I'm not a believer in spiritualism, but there does seem to be something of it. Isn't that interesting?
I mean, isn't that kind of like if I'm like, say, I don't know, running a ghost tour and I go, well, I was a skeptic, but I don't know.
Yeah,
these other people,
that's fair.
like it's kind of like it's almost your bona fides. Like you can believe me because I don't believe in this shit.
That's true. That does give it an air of.
But who knows what goes on in a young man's mind when he's trying to get a woman? You know, like we will say and do
You've
the
been there.
dumbest.
You can tell us.
Of course, like we've all of us have. I guarantee you've said or done something stupid. Thinking like at the time, it was like this is going to get her. Yeah, and then she sees right through it.
Right.
Yeah. So that's what's going on there with that guy.
Now, what's kind of wild about this whole idea of the spiritualism movement, it does begin in the late 1840s and has ties to Hydesville, New York.
Okay.
Which is known as the burned area because of the religious fervor that has burned through that region for so many years. I mean, the Church of Latter-day Saints has ties to that area too.
All right.
So all of these really diverse and interesting movements have a lot of that has come out of that part of New York.
Is that where Joseph Smith was from? Is that where he started? Yeah. Okay.
Now
where he found the gold
the plates
or whatever.
Yeah. Now, what's interesting is it starts in the U.S. and then jumps the pond to England.
Okay.
Usually it's the other way around.
Well,
but
Jimi Hendrix did it.
there you go. This phenomenon arrives in England in 1852 via the American medium Maria B. Hayden. The spiritualism movement took off at that point, with people from all walks of life taking part in for both communing with the dead and for fun, because this was entertainment too. It was oftentimes done as a little show.
Right.
You're getting a spook out of it, or a little surprise. Oh, there's a knocking there. Or we'd have accounts of the mediums supposedly levitating in some cases. Some of these are quasi risque.
In what way?
One medium account I said it was a pair of mediums working together.
Yeah.
And the one lady supposedly levitated above the table,
right,
and then her clothes fell away.
Go on.
While the other young woman, her
Yes.
partner, was essentially coordinating this seance. So there are these somewhat risque elements involved, at least in the early forms.
How would they have done that back then? Like,
no idea.
because these aren't done on stages like we do today,
Sometimes.
right? Oh, they are.
Yeah. Well, sometimes. Usually you hear about them being done in parlors and things like
parlors.
that.
That's what I was going to say.
But you do have, much like psychic shops we see today, they've set up their own thing. So come on in, get a reading, commune with your loved ones, find out that the answer to that question you always wanted to ask, that sort of thing. And we'll get that answer for you. Okay, and they've got a setup. Now,
fascinating.
It is fascinating. And there's so many rabbit holes we could go down with this. There's the rise of ghost photography at this time, which has a really it takes off in the 1860s.
Oh, you're talking about where they make it look like there's a ghost.
Right.
Not yeah. Okay, yeah.
Well, and people claiming
Double
that those
exposure.
are ghosts. Right.
Yeah.
And people claiming that those are
Sure.
ghosts. And showing photos of ectoplasm and things like that.
Yeah.
That burns out in the late 1860s, but it has a really intense flare-up there in the 1860s to almost 70s.
And then in the 2000s, when every idiot has a camera phone,
well, yeah.
and they...
The orbs, guys. The orbs are dust.
The orbs, the streaks.
Yeah. It's dust particles and drops in the air and
the
moisture.
face in the shadow, the face
Sure.
in the window. It's reflections. It's just.
And I'm not denigrating
mist.
you. I mean,
I am.
Everybody wants to believe in something beyond what we currently have.
We need to.
Right.
It's
exactly. It's a human
need.
condition.
Yeah.
But some of the folks that are just like, it's an orb. It's dust.
They want
buddy.
it to be so bad.
Yeah,
It's
they really
sad.
do.
You know, I don't tell people this, but I figure on a Halloween episode, this might be the time to do it. I actually do have some medium abilities, and I'm not being funny here. And I could.
I've heard you were empathic.
Well, I am an empath, but I'm also I can commune with the dead.
Go on.
Please don't make a joke out of this. All right, someone in the audience. I'm seeing an L. Anybody with an L out there in their name? Maybe you, sir. Yes, you. What L? I'm seeing an L. Is there an L somewhere in your name?
First and last name.
Okay. Laura Lee? Is your name Laura Lee?
Well, I can be if you want me to.
No. Please don't. I'm just, sometimes it's fuzzy. I don't use this all the time. There's someone around you named Laura. Is there a Laura around you somewhere? Maybe she's passed on, or maybe she's still here.
Oh, she certainly is a relation. Yes.
Yes, of course, Laura. And she says, "Hi, Mike. Are you Mike? Is that your name, Mike?"
Yes.
Yes, I'm seeing that, Mike. Okay, and so Laura is she's still with us though. She's
very much so.
Yes.
I hope so. Anyway.
Yes, of course. Well, she just wants you to know that she is still with us and she's okay.
Why she couldn't just send me a text message? That's fine. But
well,
okay, go ahead.
Go check your phone because she just did.
Okay.
Right. And there we go. I did some speaking with the. It's not even the afterlife; it's the now life. All right, I stalled for you, Matt. What else you got?
No stalling for me, sir.
Oh, okay.
Let's see. Now,
thank you, sir.
Thanks, Mike. This phenomenon of spiritualism is going to have, again, it's being used for supposed communication with the dead. It's also being used as a form of entertainment, and we are going to have mediums, pamphlets, newspapers, conventions, even libraries being dedicated to this.
Like whole libraries.
Whole libraries. Like social clubs, libraries, all of that, particularly in England.
Yeah. Okay. So this was a huge thing.
This was a huge thing.
That
Absolutely.
if you have a whole library dedicated, so that means that people are writing books about this stuff.
Yeah.
Wow.
And this begins popping up in the 1860s.
I'd like to get a hold of one of those old books, those old spiritualism books.
Yeah, you can. One of the articles I brought in today is advertising their books.
Uh-huh.
So these guys were writing quite a bit on this topic.
Okay.
And I'm sure some of them were writing as shysters, and there's a lot of folks that really believe this.
You mean they weren't legitimate spiritualists?
Some may not have been.
They weren't legitimate dead talkers tours?
Right.
Yes.
Now, the movement is going to continue through the Victorian era, Queen Victoria herself being a regular attendee at seances following the death of her beloved Prince Albert in 1861. Of course, famously, Queen Victoria never wears anything essentially but black after Albert dies. And the Lincolns, particularly Mary Todd, would host mediums at the White House to commune with first Eddie or Edward, who died in 1850, and later, of course, with Willie, who dies in 1862 there in the White House. Now, the late 19th and early 20th century saw another wave of high-profile spiritualists and their detractors, such as Sir Arthur Conan Doyle, who was a huge proponent of spiritualism, and his first good friend and then later bitter enemy, Harry Houdini. Houdini was brilliant at crushing mediums.
Yeah.
He really was very insulted by the concept of spiritualism and magic and everything else, and he really thought these people were taking advantage of other people.
So he was like the James Randi of his time. You know who James Randi is?
See the guy who
he debunks all these people.
Right.
Yeah.
Yeah. So not only was he a brilliant escape artist and illusionist, but he was crushing mediums and whatnot.
So, but what was I didn't know that he had a falling out with Doyle.
Doyle, my original understanding was that Doyle goes hardcore into spiritualism after his son dies in World War I. However, come to find out he actually has ties back into the late 19th century.
Okay.
Where he's in these various, he's actually involved in the famous Ghost Club in England. And so he's got pretty deep ties to spiritualism and really looking into the potential for communing with the dead. This is an interest of his going way back. Of course, it really gets bumped up a notch because of World War I and the terrible losses there, including in his own family. Houdini and him are close for a long time, but Doyle honestly believed Houdini had magical abilities. And Houdini would routinely try to show him, look, it's a trick, it's an illusion. I'm getting out of this, or I'm doing this because I can manipulate a lock or a binding or something like that.
Double jointed.
Or in a way that you can't see.
Right.
But here, I'm going to do it for you, and I'll show you the process. And Doyle didn't believe him.
Jeez, I wish.
And so they wind up having a falling out, in part due to that. And I would like to think because Houdini saw that Doyle was probably being manipulated.
You know what's amazing to me are the people that like a Houdini who, this is what he does, and he's trying to convince someone who thinks he's like really doing magic.
Right.
No. It's an illusion. It's a trick. But there are these magicians and illusionists and stuff out there, and people out there like that like they're very successful at it, but they also like make no bones that, like it's bull. Like I'm tricking you, I'm fooling you, know, but people are still like, they don't want to hear it. I did a commercial with Chris Angel once. Remember him?
Oh, really?
Yeah.
Wow.
Well, it's another story, but his show in Vegas at the time was called Believe.
Right.
And while we were taking a break, there was an audience there. It was a commercial for this magic kit that he had. And while the audience was there, we were on a little break, and he was taking some questions from the audience, And some girl was like, "Why is the word lie in red while the rest of the letters are, black?" And he's like, "Well, because I want you to know that everything you're seeing that I do is a lie.
Right.
Like it's an illusion. I'm lying to you." And she's like, "Ow." And, like she just like, and like they don't show you how it's done. They don't want to show you how it's done. But anyway, I just think it's interesting that people that, make their living like doing a certain thing want people that love what they do to see that, no, I'm tricking you. I'm fooling you. I'm pulling whatever. I don't know. I think it's odd.
I got some skill and whatnot. I'm not going to deny that, but this is not magic.
Right.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Exactly.
There's no such thing.
Right.
I thought you were saying you've got some skill and you were going to pull out a trick, and I would have been excited.
Surprise.
Yeah, like, hey,
Doves.
just a fireball. Okay. I'm sorry.
Interesting side note with my family, my grandfather was actually at Houdini's last show.
Oh, yeah?
Yeah, my grandfather Daniel's my mom's side of the family.
No, that's cool.
Yeah.
Where was that?
Gosh. I should say one of his last shows, because Grandpa was in Detroit, but I'm not certain his last show was in Detroit.
Okay.
So I got to double check that.
Fair enough.
Yeah. But I did bring in some examples of the newspapers during the Civil War years talking about spiritualism.
All right.
And what was fascinating is, while we had some good examples that I provided you for Halloween, hundreds, 1,000 or so hits for Halloween during the Civil War years, thousands of hits, multiple thousands of hits on topics regarding spiritualism during the same 4-year
so that was the big thing.
That was
spiritualism.
The big thing. Yep.
Interesting. Now was there? Maybe this is what you're about to get to, but was there? Because Christianity was still the predominant religion here,
right? So,
was there backlash to this rise in spiritualism, and was it mostly among the young, or was it everybody that was into this?
Everybody's into it.
Okay.
Across the board, rich, poor, old, young, what have you.
Okay.
Because everybody has that need for learning about the unknown. Now, there is a backlash. It's not a big backlash in the sense that it completely knocks down this movement, because it's going to continue. But there are numerous groups, particularly religious, that are pushing back against it.
Okay.
The example I have in front of me here is from the Vermont Christian Messenger, and their entire front page is just one massive rebuttal of spiritualism. And this is April 6th, 1861. Okay. But in other cases, we have, for example...
And we're not reading it to you because it's microscopic.
Well, and it's massive, too.
Yeah, and it's really big.
But it's just one huge biblical-based rebuttal of spiritualism.
I don't know if you can see just how small that is. I think you can. It's very small. And faint. Jesus.
Yeah, my printer was starting to go. But this actually is from April 7th, 1862. And this is a editorial that someone has written into the Cleveland Daily Leader, basically berating them for their recent dismissal of spiritualism. And they wrote, let me turn a little bit here. A large and respected class of your readers are believers in spiritualism, and have given the subject the thought and research that it deserves. Had you done the same, you would have reached or published a similar conclusion in regards to spiritualism, in doing which you have vilified millions of your fellow man, embracing thousands of those against it. So he's saying, look, there's millions of us who believe in this thing, and we think there's something here, and you've only got a few thousand who are against it.
Right.
Yeah.
Huh.
Now, we're going to continue to see this back and forth in the papers about spiritualism, but also a lot of advertising going on. One of the this example from 1863 actually comes out of the Detroit Free Press, and it's a literary notice. And it starts off talking about the different books and things that are coming out in regards to spiritualism. The history of the supernatural, of great nations, and its, and all churches, Christian and pagan.
This is also small print.
I tried to get these as large as I could.
Just
Demonstrating a Universal Faith in 2 volumes by William Howing, Philadelphia, blah, blah, blah.
Yeah.
Now, perhaps no writer of the age has gone more deeply or thoroughly into the study of the supernatural, or what is now more commonly called the philosophy of spiritualism, than William Howitt, the author of the 2 volumes bearing the above title. His varied learning and extensive acquaintance with the histories and religions of the world have enabled him to give a vast scope to the present work. His researches for evidence of the supernatural extend, as the title indicates, through all ages and all faiths, and he finds them so abundant as to warrant him the conclusion that, quote, it exists everywhere, and its roots are in the foundation of all things. So that's a pretty good review there, in the sense of promoting your work.
Sure. So what, these guys would go around and go into the house and spiritualize, like what do they...
Well, in the case of that, that's part of the more scientific movement behind spiritualism, which is also kind of piggybacking off of what we were talking about earlier with science and its clashing with faith.
Right.
Okay? So there was a real line, I should say, with spiritualism where they were trying to put hard science on this thing and really determine, yes, that there is something beyond this life. Yes, we can communicate with it. And some folks are doing this more through mediums and whatnot, and other folks are trying to apply the scientific method.
Okay.
And there would be argument for a continuance of that today. We see that with these various ghost shows. Some of them are bringing in the medium and wandering around the building. Oh, somebody's talking over here. And others are bringing in all sorts of equipment and trying to apply science.
That's true. That's true. You're right.
We still have this dichotomy within the larger idea of spiritualism.
Huh, I never thought of that way. But that's a good point. You got the person who's going there and they're like, oh, this room is so cold, it's so dark. I feel a dark feeling. It's a heavy feeling.
It's getting chilly in here.
It is getting chilly in here. I keep thinking it's summer, but I have that air conditioner on 65. You want me to turn it off? Are you guys cold?
No, I'm good.
Okay, all right, good.
I just thought that was ironic.
It's cold and it's dark. The walls are black.
This one I thought you would find particularly interesting. This comes from the New York Daily Herald in May of 1863. Spiritualism at the White House, the new religious philosophy. We publish in another column this morning an account, which we presume to be true, of an interview with President Lincoln, recently held with the spirits of Knox, Franklin, Napoleon, and Douglas at the White House. Our readers
what a combination.
Yeah, a huge combination. Our readers will find the conversation between the president and the spirits extremely curious, amusing, and interesting. Honest old Abe was not at all daunted by the supernatural revelations, but cracked his jokes with the usual Seinfeld and beheld the miraculous...
Schadenfreude?
No.
Oh. Seinfeld.
And beheld the miraculous and pictorial predictions of the fate of the pirate Alabama, with his custom complacency. So basically they told him, look, they're going to track down the Alabama and sink it. This spiritual seance at the White House will attract even more general attention to the new system of religious philosophy of which Judge Edmonds appears to be the Newton or Bacon. And now we're going to have another advertisement. It will revive and excite the popular interest in the subject of spiritualism and will give the, quote, life of the home, which Judge Edmonds has just introduced to us, and Howitt's History of the Supernatural. So we've already spoken on that, which has just been published in Philadelphia, a very wide and potential circulation. So they're pushing the books too. And come to find out, I dug a little deeper. Life of home. Home is actually one of these mediums. It's not talking about home as in your house. This is a person.
This is a person. Yeah. Life of home.
Life of home, yes. Huh. So there's a lot of this going around. We're also seeing We're also seeing conventions.
Oh, yeah, you mentioned this before.
There's a huge convention in Chicago in 1864 that's the 4th annual convention of spiritualism. So that's been going on for a while, where they're talking about spiritualism and discussing different aspects of it. There's one from, it's from Louisiana, a New Orleans paper. I'm suddenly blanking on the name. But it's talking in 1865 about this hideous conglomeration or hideous gathering, they refer to it, this hideous gathering of spiritualists. So the paper's kind of making fun of these people, and they're giving descriptions of everyone who stands up to talk, and some of them are well-dressed, and some of them are wild-haired, and they're really kind of mocking this.
Yeah, it's like a Trekkie convention or any other kind of convention, like Comic-Con.
But
did you look at me that way? Do you go to Trekkie conventions?
Not Trek conventions, but I've been to numerous nerd conventions.
Okay,
yes.
D&D.
Actually, Comic-Cons and things like that.
Yeah, I've been to a horror con once.
Oh, that's cool.
It was here at the Wyndham.
Oh, really?
I met Gary Busey and Jake Busey.
Oh, were they nice?
They were nice, and then
Cut that off kind of quick, man.
Well, because nah. No, they were nice. They were nice. I just witnessed something later.
Gotcha. Moving on.
Yeah. Don't need to share.
But the journalist in the case of this particular Louisiana paper is not only, he's kind of poking fun at the folks who have shown up for this convention, but he does give a lot of account of the folks who are saying, look, we've got speakers galore on this topic. How do we get this movement beyond just going around and talking about ghosts or talking about dead people? There really seems to be an attempt to expand spiritualism. And of course, those folks at that convention would probably be quite pleased to see what happens in the late 19th and early 20th century as it just explodes across the world.
So it does become more of an organized, is that the word you were kind of looking for? What they're looking to do? So it's like an organized religion.
Right.
And they don't meet with any backlash from its adherents at that point? Because, I'm thinking if I'm getting in the spiritualism thing,
right,
it sounds kind of fun, sounds kind of cool, but to me, it's the difference of teaching myself how to play piano because I discovered the Doors and I wanted to learn how to play because I wanted to learn how to play that music, as opposed to being forced to sit down in 4th grade and taking a piano lesson because my mom paid for piano lessons. Do you understand what I'm saying?
Right.
The minute you start to structure it, that's when I lose it, and then that's when I either rebel or I just leave. So was there a rift where people were like, okay, and then other people were like, no, it's fine the way it is?
Not that I was seeing in that particular article, but I'm sure it did exist.
Had to, right?
Right. And because there are a lot of powerful organizations that are pushing back against this. We mentioned the Vermont Christian Monitor there. The Jewish faith is not real keen on this.
Right.
Islam is not real keen on this. Many of the Christian faiths are not real keen on this idea of spiritualism and communing with the dead. You probably remember from your church days that thou shalt not suffer the witch to live. in Old Testament, which supposedly is a mistranslation.
I don't remember that one.
But you also have this idea of not supposed to commune with the dead.
Yeah, that I remember.
The dead have nothing to tell, I believe is the quote.
Well, the pirates say dead men tell no tales,
True.
right?
Right. And there's only one form of magic that's, and I'm going to go down a nerd hole here for a moment.
If you say the gathering.
No, there's only one form of magic specifically called out in the Bible.
Okay.
It's necromancy, which is communing with the dead.
Falling in love with dead people. Oh.
No.
Yes.
Which is communicating with the dead.
Right.
Okay.
Because Jesus, is that what you're talking about? Jesus and Lazarus? What are you talking about? Lazarus?
No, what I'm talking about is actually Old Testament.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, where it specifically said you're not supposed to do this.
Uh-huh.
Yeah, you're not supposed to commune with the dead. And so there's a lot of
Oh, you're saying that there's an example in the Old Testament of saying you're not supposed to do it. Okay, gotcha.
Yeah.
Sorry. I thought you were saying that there's one example where it's okay.
No.
And I was like, whoa.
No.
Got it.
And so I think that's why a lot of these faiths are pushing back. Now, what's interesting is that in many of these articles, particularly that one I mentioned, the editorial, he's saying, look, there are folks who have broken with their faith and are spiritualists. There are folks who have retained their faith and are spiritualists. This is just something else that we believe in. This particular article from the Philadelphia Inquirer in '62, Mr. Dicey on spiritualism in America, he essentially says, look, Americans have always been pretty tolerant of various isms. Now, we could debate that, you and I, but according to this gentleman writing to his colleagues in England about spiritualism and its movement in the United States, he's saying, for the most part, you, me, and the guy at the corner, we all don't care.
Right. We have different isms, but we don't give a shit.
Right,
Yeah.
exactly. And it's not affecting our daily lives, where we do have various religious organizations who are, again, pushing back because they see it as a threat. But they're also writing things like, this is not going to break the faith. This is not going to break the church or various other churches. One of them was very aggressive on that in one of their editorials, saying, yeah, this spiritualism thing, it's kind of caught fire, seems to be really popular, but it's not the downfall of the faith. So keep the faith, keep coming to church.
Yeah. It's like I remember, growing up, and I'm sure they've been around forever, but I remember growing up, late 80s, early 90s, there were all these groups of concerned mothers and running around and, this can't be on TV because of my Christian faith and I don't want my children hearing it and everything. And the simple argument is, well, then don't let them. Let them. Yeah. You're the parent.
Right.
But it sounds kind of the same to me as like people are afraid of it challenging their own faith. They're not strong enough in their own faith and they know it. And so anything that might challenge it or make them question it has to be destroyed because they can't possibly think that they're not as strong as they want to be or something. You know what I mean? Like it's more about it's a threat to them personally.
Right.
Than it is society.
And I think there's a lot to be said with that. But again, I just wanted to lay down kind of the views on death and this movement that is occurring in the midst of our Civil War and how popular it is. And the war itself and the tragedy of the war, 750,000 some odd dead from the American Civil War because they trended the numbers up a few years ago. That has an effect on anybody, those losses. I mean,
what's the population of the country? 38 million or something like that?
33 million.
33 million? So that's a pretty nice chunk.
Exactly. And that's
everybody's
not even including
know
the
somebody.
wounded and whatnot.
Right, exactly.
Everybody's going to know somebody affected by this war. And so this phenomenon, and I apologize, I keep using that term, of spiritualism is really going to play off that. And
they need soothing.
Yep, they need something, exactly. And we will continue to see this throughout into the 20th century, World War I. We don't see as much of a resurgence of it after World War II, but it does tend to ebb and flow with national
wars.
Tragedies.
Well, that makes sense.
Yeah.
Right? You're going through a trauma and you want to know that, like the whole town's male population is wiped out.
Right.
Like you want to, and you weren't ready to let them go. They're your boys. They're little boys. Not little boys, but to you, they're still your baby, you know? Mm-hmm. And so you want to talk to them. You need that comfort and everything. Yeah. And it's just, I mean, it makes sense that they would, that would become more popular during wars.
Exactly.
All right.
So that's what I have for you this evening,
Halloween.
Matt. That's Halloween.
That's
exactly.
Halloween. Matt BOOders. Very good. Thank you, Matt.
It's my pleasure.
The name of your podcast is the History Things Podcast. You and Pat McGuire do. By the way, I have to tell you, I listened to your 9/11 show, and I thought it was very moving.
Oh, thank you, sir.
Not enough of me in there, but you know,
it's not about that.
It's not about that, apparently. No, but seriously, it was very good. I thought you guys did a good job. You know, it's a tough one to do. 9/11.
It was very difficult, and Pat's got some real close ties, much closer than mine, being a Midwestern boy.
Yeah.
To that day, but I thought we both shared some good stories. But it was a difficult show to put together.
Well,
and
the
work
guests
that you
and
guys
everything.
did here with your show around 9/11, I thought was quite good as well.
What the hell did we do?
Thought you had that discussion.
Oh, the live show.
Yeah.
Oh, yeah. Thank you. We just slapped that together. I mean, it was we were
Well, you're
like,
going to be continuing the tradition, it sounds like.
Well, yes. Every year we'll do an anniversary show, and we have this coming year, next year, I want to do an episode a day on Patreon that is interviewing someone who either survived the collapse in New York, or was a first responder who went from elsewhere to help in the pile.
That's huge, bud.
That is. Yeah. So I have one survivor in the can, and then another one lined up who was he went digging in the pile.
Wow.
And if anybody knows anyone, if you are a listener, because the survivor of he survived the South Tower collapsing just as he walked out of the North Tower, and he was. We just found out by accident that he's a listener of the show already.
That.
Yeah,
in the email you put out.
What email did I put out? What the hell? I don't even know what I do. Did I put out an email?
One of the state of the show.
Oh, the state of the show shows. I forgot you're a patron. That's right. I'm sorry. Okay. I was like,
well, I guess I know where my money's going.
No, well, you don't interact. It's hard for me to remember. You got 234 of them now, so it's like, you know, it's hard to keep track of all those names. Anyway, so yeah, we're going to do that, and that's what we'll do. But anyway. History Things Podcast, that's the name of your show.
Yes, sir.
Check it out. They do quarterly episodes, and they're about, what are you on, Verdun now, I think?
We just got done with our Q4 episode, and we will be releasing the follow-up for that at probably the end of this month. We tend to do a big quarterly episode and then a follow-up. In this case, because it was such a big story, we actually broke it down to part 1, part 2. But yes, we were looking at the 151st Infantry for the French Army, the Verdun Regiment, and tying into what they did, the very lengthy story they had in World War I. And we had Jonathan Bracken on, a friend and colleague of mine who does World War I history.
That's cool.
And he did a great job, a great presentation.
I mean, his picture looks like he would do a great job, because it's a very nice, almost professional. It looks like a professional photograph. Yeah, well, good for him. All right, well, so check that out, ladies and gentlemen. It's anywhere you can find podcasts, or just certain places. Okay, anywhere you can find podcasts, including the Alexa app. We run a promo for you on our live show every week, so people can hear that. And Mike Lentz, thank you very much for your participation.
Good to see you, Mike.
On the mic, and also in the Peanut Gallery, as always. Thank you very much. And ladies and gentlemen, thank you. We've got Thanksgiving, and then that's it. We've done every holiday of the year for this, and now we got to figure out something else to do with Matt BOOders for specials, because you don't want to keep redoing holidays.
Right.
Maybe we do. I don't know. We're going to talk about it, and we'll figure it out. But in the meantime, thank you very much for watching. I hope you enjoyed it. I hope you learned something, and we will talk to you next time.
There's no time.
Osderspen brought us in.
No, God!
I'm afraid.
No, God, please, no! No!
It fell off!
No!
no. Oh.
I declare bankruptcy! Unmute me!
I want the damn internet to work.
There's no time.
Everything's wrong.
I got hairy
The
legs.
stress of my modern office has caused me to go into a depression.
Is that Bawa?
It's an epidural.
Oh, you probably use bacon grease and sand.
Oh my god.
All men and women created by the go. You know the thing.
I have told you there is no time for that.
I come back and they said we took it through drive-through and I told you not to take. And he's going, they going, but it fit.
Come on, man.